Hi, man. Thanks very much for coming back to the grassy knoll.
Oh, thanks. I don't mind it at all.
I hope you feel more comfortable. I mean, you had a lot of doubts, I guess. You know, you expressed as much in emails that went back and forth between us. But you make it right. I mean, a lot of people who had questions about this, in the sense that they might have been naysayers or critics, aren't necessarily in that status right now. So thanks a lot for coming on, and let me just get this down before we start. If people want to, either right now or when they listen to this in the archives, check out what you've written about, much about what you're going to speak to today. They can do so at atgpress.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, and I put a link that would bring them right to your particular portion or section of that website, so they can hit on that. If you go to Vyzygoth.com and look in the either in the upcoming shows or in the audio, which we still have the last 3 segments with the I-Man, you'll be able to get right to his page. So if he refers to such, I know I'm going to go there, and I would suggest you do too. I want to also add one other change, if I could, before we get into the good stuff, and that is, if you want to IM, instant message, you can. You can do it via MSN, all right, that would be Vyzygoth, or at Yahoo, and that would be VYZ 1400. So if you want to shoot a question to the I-Man, you may do that. This is all brand new. I don't expect to take it for it all to take at one time, but and that's what we'll do now. In time to come, I might install an 800 number, but first things first. Okay, so if you want to get in touch with us, please add what is it? My MSN Messenger, which is Vyzygoth, or also at Yahoo, which is Biz1400, or shoot me an email, which I'm checking all throughout this time, at Vyzygoth@hotmail.com. It's VYZYGOTH. Now, where shall we start, I-Man?
Well, I had wrote a letter to a researcher who got some flack from a naysayer down in Texas, and I just kind of blew off some steam with the letter that I had to him. So I had been running through a lot of my stuff, wondering what I could use for this show, and I decided, well, I'll just try this letter first. And like I say, it is a letter, and it's probably about 10 or 12 pages, and it's got a lot of meat in it that I was expressing to him of what to look for, because he didn't have the information that I had to rebut the naysayer that was, cognitive dissonance took over its place, because it's so foreign to the mind that, once a lie is started, and there's been a lie for 200 years, people tend to believe the lie, and when the truth hits them, they still tend to believe the lie because the truth is so foreign that they feel it's got to be a lie. So that's why I just picked this letter. And like I say, it is in letter form, and I'll be reading it, so, I hope it isn't dry for them.
Well, I mean, just before you start, I'm really bad about interrupting you, but when you say it's been alive for 200 years, the length of time doesn't make it any more true, or true at all. But aren't we really facing the situation, though, I-Man, that it's been a lot of lies that were constructed 200 years ago, and we really, most of us, have never hit upon the fact that we're encompassed by them?
Right. That's true. It's just like all the lies that the president says and the government says today. That even like Roosevelt during the war, there was lies that the Japs, came after us, when in fact Roosevelt, right after he got into office in 1933, wanted to create a war with Japan because it had to protect the Rockefellers' oil fields in China. And it wasn't known until, just recently of what FDR did and how bad he was, and he allowed the attack to happen to goad the people into standing behind him to institute World War II. So, a lot of things come out, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. But this is so big that they can't allow this truth to come out, and it's by going through a lot of different cases and reading the actual words of the cases, and it's put me in mind of just recently the fact that today's kids can't even locate most of the states in the country.
Oh, did you hear that yesterday?
Yeah, well, I had seen that quite a few times before on the emails, before it hit the major, news media. But that's the truth, because I've dealt with a lot of kids, and I used to be with Boy Scouts for 24 years, and I could see the dumbing down of the kids, because in the Boy Scouts we teach them a lot of other stuff, and a lot of it's compass and geography and stuff like this. And I found from 1970 all the way up to 1989, the kids are getting dumber. They're not getting smarter.
Right.
And there's a lot of things like that. So when you go in to read these cases, and you know the English language and grammar and how to diagram a sentence, which when I went to school, that's all we did was diagram sentences. But see, since 1990, I used that a lot when I wrote my books and diagramming sentences, and to get the meat of what it was and what they were really saying, not what just appeared to be what they were saying on, in the words. And of course, they change the words to be a term. And anytime you see the word term, I say the word term, but anytime you see term in a statute, it's different than if it was a word. In other words, they take corn, and it's a word, and if they say the term corn means, then it's what that means, not what the word corn means, like corn on the cob, you eat it, it's food,
Right.
So you have to know what the statute says, what the law says, and if it is couched in terms or is it couched in words. And because most of it is all statute, it's all couched in terms. And on ATG Press, there is a site in there that says terms, not words, and that would be good for people to read. And if they also want to become educated in it, is to go and get a book on diagramming sentences and start playing around with small sentences, and you'd be amazed at what they find out is the predicate and what's the adverb and what's the subject, and they all come into play. And
but how so? I mean, is it because you have to, for instance, identify, shall we say, a parenthetical clause?
Right.
I guess a non-restrictive clause they would call it, which if you pull out might change.
Yeah, if you pull out the parenthetical clause and it still makes sense, then you can throw the parenthetical clause away.
Yeah, and if it's there, sometimes it does color differently the entire sentence.
Yes, it does.
Oof.
Or they want you to believe it means that, and it really doesn't mean that.
I mean, we all have to admit, though, everything from legislation to your insurance policy is such written obfuscation that it does exactly what I guess it's intended to do, and that is make the reader tire and just get exhausted.
Yeah, it does. And, I used to sit down and read every little fine print and everything, and my wife would always say, "What are you doing that for? Sign it." I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll sign it, and you're going to sign your life away, And after a few years of that, she really got not annoyed anymore, and I said, "See this? If I didn't read this, this is what we would be paying." And you realize that the fine print means a lot.
Yes, it does.
When they say fine print, sometimes it's bolded and big words, and that is actually considered fine print in law.
Yeah, well, I mean, they can do it right in your face. It's the way in which they do it.
Right.
And at what point they put it in. I mean, because if they can put it, 17 paragraphs deep, you're likely not to get there.
No.
So not necessarily fine print, but certainly buried for your, I wouldn't say for your,
Yeah, well, most of the time, you know, if people really sat down and read it, they wouldn't sign the contract.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, that's happened on the internet when you have this bit about I agree.
Uh-huh.
You don't read everything.
No.
And you don't know what you're agreeing to.
Right.
And we all do that, and that is a real perilous practice.
Yeah, it is. They should read, even if they take one, just read one of the things, like if you go onto a line and they say, join this club, or in order to go to the radio station or the TV station, you have to agree to the terms. Well, just, you don't have to read them all. Just take one and read entirely through the terms. And most of them will be shocked at what they got themselves into when they agree.
Yes. All right. Therefore, where are we now?
Oh.
A lot of people who had questions about this, in the sense that they might have been naysayers or critics, aren't necessarily in that status right now. So thanks a lot for coming on, and let me just get this down before we start. If people want to, either right now or section of that website, so they can hit on that. If you go to Vyzygoth.com and look in the either in the upcoming shows or in the audio, which we still have the last 3 segments with the I-Man, you'll be able to get right to his page. So if he refers to such, I know I'm going to go there, and I would suggest you do too. I want to also add one other change, if I could, before we get into the good stuff, and that is, if you want to IM, instant message, you can. You can do it via MSN, all right, now be Vyzygoth, or listen to this in the archives. Check out what you've written about, much about what you're going to speak to today. They can do so at atgpress.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, and I put a link that would bring them right to your particular portion. I-Man, thanks very much for coming back to the grassy knoll.
Oh, thanks. I don't mind it at all.
I hope you feel more comfortable. I mean, you had a lot of doubts, I guess. You expressed as much in emails that went back and forth between us. But you make it right. I mean, a lot